kids, so we are going to talk just a little bit about what is in your resource journal for narrative writing. You will also notice that with this underneath there will be times, and if you want to fast forward in the video to those different times, it will hone in on one of the certain pieces where I'll talk just a little bit about it, depending on what you're needing as a writer. So the first page that we're going to take a look at is page 91. It looks like this, and it has the narrative writing process on here. The narrative writing process and the process for informational and argumentative text, it's very similar in the sense that the names of all the parts are the same, but what you do at those different parts and what you're focusing on in a narrative text versus an argument or informational text is slightly different. So, for example, as you take a look at the brainstorming, what emotion am I trying to evoke? That is the very first part of any narrative. If you have no emotional connection to that narrative, it makes me wonder why you would tell that story. So, and when I say emotion, it doesn't have to be that it's sad, because we think of emotional as someone who is sad so often, that it can be a piece with anger, it can be fear, it can be suspense, it can be humor. It doesn't matter, but you need to have a goal with your story, which is why I tell you, whatever part you're picturing in your head, that's what you need to write about. Okay, don't try to get your character there. You don't even have to know how your character ended up in the creepy hallway with the torches up on the ceiling. You don't have to know that, but if you're picturing this environment and your character is walking around and he or she's totally freaked out or is totally okay or whatever, then what I need for you to do is start writing there, because when you don't care, your reader doesn't care. I'm not going to go through all of this. You can see here this brainstorming element when you're trying to figure out what to write. These are questions to ask yourself, but that emotional connection is going to be one of the most important. We've also talked about these right here, the best things to write about, things that you've lived in 3D, things that are pretty good, you've done lots of research or you've seen it a lot, and then the things that you're like, I think so, probably not the best places. So then you can see that you work through the drafting process, the revision process, and the editing process. You can read through these bullets. Basically, drafting is getting something down. Revising is changing the words to make it sound the way that you want it to, because remember, paragraphing and punctuation and capitalization, all those things are not for you as the writer. Those are for your reader, so that you can make sure your message is being communicated exactly as you intended. So that is that page. If you turn to page 92, we're going to spend a minute here. These are kind of elements of narratives in general. At the top, I want you to pay special attention to this right here. When to paragraph in a narrative, okay? You kind of take that idea of whenever the camera would move in a movie, okay? You have a new time, okay? So you can see the different time elements there. Those are different examples that I've seen in several texts. A new place, if your character changes location, you'll want to put new paragraphs in. And this new major event that all of a sudden, suddenly, or out of nowhere, if they're just sitting down at dinner and everybody's talking, then all of a sudden there was a knock at the door. You can put a new paragraph in there. Right? A new speaker, this is when there's dialogue. If you have two or more characters having a conversation, every time one of the characters speaks, you create a new paragraph. So even if it's, do you want to come hang out at my house today? Paragraph 1. And then the next person goes, sure. And then it comes back and says, okay, we'll bring your stuff. We'll get some pizza. Da, da. Even though this person only said sure, that's its own paragraph because a new person was talking. Again, that's an organizational element for your reader because you know the new character is speaking, but your reader needs to see that. If you open up whatever book you're reading right now, just take a quick look at the dialogue and the paragraphing that you see in there. Okay. And then the last type of paragraph in a narrative is creative, kind of whenever you want to. When we looked at that model text from the raft, she had each one, it stop the noise, stop, stop. All of those were their own paragraph, almost written in a poetry format, but in this way that you can make sure that your reader is getting that emotion that you are hoping to evoke. And there she was trying to get us to see her her fear with everything. She wants it all to stop. And so you can use creative paragraphs. We've also seen in Famous Last Words, she'll use the sound of the ghost coming, or I've seen like where you're like heartbeats or footsteps, or I don't know if it's sad, it could just be tears flowing down my face, and then you get a new paragraph. It doesn't matter, but these creative paragraphs are really important in a narrative. You don't want to overly use them, because then it becomes, it becomes poetry for one, but it becomes too expected. And so you need to make sure that you're really focusing on, when am I doing this? Okay. The other parts here, you have elements of a narrative, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but I want you to draw your attention to these, because when I think of narratives, this is what I should be experiencing. There's probably some sort of repetition, nonfiction. You also have back in the front part of your journal on page 24, you have all these fiction signposts. This is exactly what writers do. So as a reader, if you're noticing these things, think about how as a writer you could create these noticings for your reader. That again and again, a memory moment, tough questions, ahas, words of the wiser, contrasts and contradictions. So how can you do that in your piece? Again, this is quite a bit of information. I don't expect you to do all of this. It's just some stuff I want you to be thinking about. Then we have here dialogue rules. There's punctuated dialogue here as you start getting into that. So take a look as you go, and then there's a dialogue example down here. So you can kind of see, the bolded parts. That's where the dialogue is punctuated for you to take a look at. The next page that we're going to look at is page 93. These are different types of leads. And what I've done here is I've taken 5 types of leads. These are not all of the leads on the planet, okay? There's quotes or dialogue, anecdotes. An anecdote is a short personal story, very quick, but it just references oftentimes the writer or narrator's life. A description where you're describing something, a fact, we give a fact, and then a question. And then down here on the left, I just put some examples of some stories that I've seen several times. So there's a spy story, a family vacation, if you're writing a nonfiction narrative oftentimes, or if you're amping up the family vacation story for your fiction piece. Some sort of injury, maybe you broke an arm or a finger, or you dared to do something and it didn't turn out so well for you. A kidnapping story, and then some kind of sad story. So what I've done here is you can see that I took for each one of the types of leads, I created one of those for this. So like if this is injury story for dialogue, I triple dog dare you, my so-called best friend said to me as I stood atop the 10-foot wall ready to jump. This was a good idea, right? And so even right there, I've even gotten a tough question in and I didn't even mean to. Okay, here's description for sad. The constant beeping of the heart monitor reassured me of life. Life for another beep at least. The sound had become a constant for me this past week. That and the semi-soft chair I made on my porch, the subpar food when I actually ate, and the cheerful yet sorrow nurse who came in every hour. So you can see that there are different elements here for all of them, and you can take a look and try 2 or 3 different leads. If you're working on a certain piece, you might as well try a couple to see if, one of them tends to work better than others. So if you're doing a family vacation, or let's say you're doing a sad story, read all of what I have here. I mean, you wouldn't copy it verbatim, which means word for word, but you could definitely take the idea that I have there and use that to enhance your stories as well. The final page we're going to take a look at, which is where I see a lot of us needing a little bit of support, is page 94. And this is balancing dialogue in your narrative. What I notice a lot at this point is that you like to put a lot of dialogue. And when you have dialogue, you have taken your paragraphing from here and you've paragraphed it out and you've done your new speaker paragraphing and you're like, man, I'm like new paragraph. And you're just going back and forth because all you have is this dialogue between 2 people. I want for you to imagine what that looks like to the reader, because again, as the writer, your job is to communicate and make sure that the reader understands what you are saying. And if you just have two people going back and forth, your reader is seeing person one, talk, 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 person two, talk, 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 person one, talk, 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 person two, talk, talk, talk. And all they're doing is staring at each other, talking. And if that's not the case, if one of your characters feels frustrated, or one of your characters is sad, or one of your characters is getting ready while the conversation's taking place, remember that you may know that as the writer, but as the reader, we don't know that. We only know what is presented to us on the page. So there are basically three ways that you can add dialogue to your narrative. You can add what the character is thinking or feeling during the conversation. Okay, I was nervous about this. I knew this couldn't go right. I was wondering why she was looking at me like that. Lots of things, whatever's going on inside the head or body of the character who's currently communicating. So what are they thinking or what are they feeling, either like inside their body or like feelings, like emotional feelings. Okay, then you have what does the character see or hear during the conversation, or any of the senses. So they're looking, I glanced over her shoulder while she was talking and saw the refrigerator was still open, so I stepped past to close it. Or I could hear the sound of my brothers fighting in the background. Or I could hear the crunching of shoes coming toward me, and my heart beating almost out of my chest. But what does the character see, hear, touch, taste, any of those during the conversation? Maybe they're eating chips or something. Okay, and then the third way is, how is it being said? So is it said, is it yelled, is it cried, is it whispered, is it angrily, how is it being spoken? So then what I've done here for you is I've provided two different texts that are just a double backflip. Of course I can do a double backflip. Dude, be careful. I'm always careful. Whatever you say, I'm not doing it, that's for sure. That's because you're not as awesome as I am. You're a chicken. And I don't want to break a bone, start gushing blood, or worse. So then you take that same dialogue, because there's nothing wrong with the dialogue. Okay, a double backflip. Of course I can do a double backflip. And so we're going to go to how this is being said. I said with a confidence I definitely didn't feel. So we now know that the reader now knows that the character doesn't feel as confident as he or she is making it sound. Okay, then we're going to blue, which is what the character is thinking or feeling. It says, I mean, I had landed once. That was enough, right? And then we're going back to the seeing and hearing. I bounced slightly on the trampoline, feeling it spring beneath my feet. So that one line has, I took a double backflip, of course, a double backflip, and used all three of those. Don't do that every time. You don't need all three of them. Sometimes you don't need, like here, I didn't use any after the dialogue. Okay? But what you're looking for with dialogue is that you should probably have more of the descriptors, these elements here, than dialogue, to have enough information for your reader to have a clear picture of what is happening in your text. Okay? So as you're taking a look at this one, really give it a try. Maybe pick one of these three, or read the examples here. He knelt down, gathering the larger pieces, working to put them back together like a puzzle, quickly realizing it was hopeless. Okay, that's what I'm seeing. I am watching him kneel down and gather the pieces. Now he's going to feel. I felt badly for him, but I wasn't about to take the blame on this one. Okay, nothing. It wasn't my fault. My brother pleaded, panic echoing in his voice. Take a look at how I balance the dialogue here, and then see if any of these elements would work for your piece. If you're stuck, always come and ask. But I really want you to spend some time with your dialogue here, especially after paragraphing as you get going. All right, those are some narrative strategies.